whose passion is to work with the refugee community. Sarah Strickley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Rhys. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and thank you for being on. And it is fitting that you are the guest for our first show because you are the inspiration to have this whole entire show be about the refugee community. So thank you so much again for being on the show. So I said that you have a passion working with the refugee community, and that is something that's rare because passion is something that people find hard, like it's hard to find. Where did you find this passion to work with the refugee community?
Sure. So my passion originally started just primarily with language and linguistics. And though I'm not a polyglot myself, I dreamed to be one day. I love language, and I think language is something that makes me feel connected to other people, and I think other people feel connected to me. So it really started off with language, and then just expanded into the immigrant and refugee communities that have always been local to me.
Yeah, and how do you think that stepping stone went from language to the refugee community in your life?
Mm-hmm. So I started out as a high school teacher in the city of Chicago, and I lived and worked among predominantly Mexican and Chinese immigrants. So that was my first job, and I just fell in love with communities that were so wildly different from what I grew up with. And I knew that that's just is how I wanted to spend my time, and the people that I wanted to surround myself with.
Absolutely. And I do want to kind of talk about, you are one of the main people in the on-ramp program at CWI, which is all about helping refugees learn more about digital literacy as well as multimedia storytelling. Can you tell us a little bit about your storytelling class that I know you started off with like 12 students and now you've quadrupled in size?
Yeah, so we've had a really lucky streak of interest. We started off really small, just with developing a storytelling curriculum, and just through word of mouth is primarily how we market our classes, word of mouth and paper flyers. Our program has really grown. I think one gift the pandemic has given myself and my colleagues is just the glaring realization of the lack of digital skills amongst a lot of our students, and it just made it abundantly clear that we needed to double down on our efforts and really grow our program so that our students can be work ready, life ready, and really engage with their community through digital avenues as well.
Absolutely. And why would you say storytelling is so important to the refugee community?
Well, I think that a lot of people like to tell the stories of refugees because they sound sensational, and they sound just so wildly different than our typical American story. So I think by allowing refugees to tell their own stories through their own lens, it gives validity to their experiences, and also I think gives them agency over their own stories. And I think agency is one thing that refugees often lack, right? They lack power and control in a lot of avenues in their life, but they should control their own stories.
Absolutely. Are there any stories that stand out to you to this day? Because you've worked with many, many refugees.
There sure are. Probably not ones that I would feel comfortable sharing personally, but I think there's never been a story that I haven't found inspiration and compassion and empathy and struggle in. I think that though the specific circumstances can be wildly different for a refugee from the Central African Republic to Myanmar to Ukraine, while political situations are really different, I find that humans generally have kind of similar feelings throughout their stories.
For sure. And it sounds like hearing all these stories has made an impact. How do you feel like it's changed you personally?
Hmm. I'm a better listener. I'm a better listener for all the stories. I find that my story feels more complete when I can put it in perspective amongst other people's stories and find those threads of similarity and empathy between them. I think it's made me a much more culturally competent person. I think I can understand and navigate, accept and respect other people's cultures, even if I don't really have a strong working knowledge of their country or of their political or religious affiliations. I think I can just be a good listener and be a learner from people who are so different than me.
Yeah, and one thing that really stood out to me, it's a word that you used yesterday when we got the opportunity to talk, was cultural competence. Can you kind of explain a little bit about why cultural competence is so important to you and for everyone, really?
Yeah. So cultural competence is the ability to appreciate, understand, and interact with people who are different from you. So cultural competency is critical in working and living in a global society. I think it makes the wheels turn smoother. It makes infrastructure, economics, politics run more smoothly when we can put ourselves in the place of other people. Really, so much of cultural competency is respect and patience in listening. And that happens globally, but also that can be so important within just the United States. There are cultural differences between someone in Georgia and someone in New York City and someone in Hawaii. And I think those skills of being an active listener and really being empathetic to someone else's culture just makes life better and more fun and less stressful. Yeah.
For sure. And just for fun, because like you said, you've talked with a lot of people of different cultures. What are some of things that, like, what are things that you've learned from different cultures that you really, really enjoy that you've brought into your day-to-day life?
Well, food. Food. The great thing about the transition from working in high school to working with adults is that I can actually become friends, and share an intimacy with my students that is appropriate. So I think I've shared many meals with my students and bonded over cooking. That is just one of my hobbies. I've also bonded a lot over gardening. That's another hobby of mine. And so many students bring seeds from their home countries and have shared them with me. So I can grow all sorts of wacky melons and gourds and eggplants and all sorts of different things. So I think those are some very direct things that I spend doing in my personal life. But I think there's, as far as other things that happen just in my general day-to-day life, a lot of it is just having a greater understanding and awareness. When I listen to and read the news, I can say oh, I know someone from Afghanistan. Like, how does that story fit into my understanding that I have with this Afghani person, or this Taiwanese person, or this Congolese person? And it helps to inform my understanding of the news in the world around me.
Yeah, and again, food makes the world go round no matter where
It
you
sure
are.
does.
So,
Yeah, my world at least.
honestly though, I do want to bring it up because yesterday when we got the opportunity to talk, I asked if there's anything you really, really wanted to touch up on, and your eyes lit up instantly. And the first word that came to your mouth was dignity. Why
Mhm.
do you believe dignity was the very, very first thing that came to your mind? Why do you think it was like that?
Um, I think that a huge, the most important thing to me, in terms of welcoming refugees or people with refugee backgrounds into our community, and into Idaho, is maintaining the dignity of new Americans. I think that you cannot truly welcome someone if you don't recognize and honor and respect their dignity. Um, People with refugee backgrounds have lived full lives of music and culture and food and love and language. But when they arrive in the United States, which is largely a monolingual country, um, a lot of times our first instinct is to um, treat refugees kind of like children, right? Because their language, their English language at least, is at a childlike level in a lot of cases. And I think we have to remember that language ability in a second or third or fourth or even fifth language, right? Some people are learning English as their fifth language, and that is not indicative of their overall skills or abilities. So I think dignity is like step number one to actually welcoming a person, apart from just lip service.
And how do you think that like we as like other Americans can put out the word to respect the people that are learning our language? Because I feel like that's one of the biggest issues going on right now is that they don't respect it and they're just mad that they don't know our language. How do you think we can spread the word of, hey, like they're trying their best and we need to respect what they're doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, one is highlighting, allowing them to highlight their stories, right? And making sure that they're seen as a whole person, not as their primary descriptor is not a refugee, right? Their primary descriptor is whoever they are, and that label as refugee has been thrust upon them. It's not a label that they wish to have, right? Refugees wish they could be at home, safe with their family in their home country. So I think that is a really big part. Is really recognizing that refugees aren't out to steal anything or take anything, right? They're fighting for safety and they're fighting for their families. And language is a hurdle in in that safety, right? The language is a hurdle that they have to cross in order to access that safety for them and their families. Um, as far as getting the word out, I suppose it really is just exposure, I think, to people with refugee backgrounds. It's um, celebrating them within our community, and supporting them in our community. Boise and all of the Treasure Valley has a ton of refugee entrepreneurs who own their own businesses and who do amazing things for our community. And by supporting them, buying locally from them, we can really elevate I suppose, the social capital of refugees in our community.
Yeah, and I have to catch myself too because like you said, they don't want to be called like refugees. They just want to be them. And I have to catch myself as well. So I appreciate you because that's something that I need to work on and be more socially conscious of. But one thing that you keep talking about is the language acquisition. And I'm going to kind of like switch it over to you, because how do you go about teaching language to you're at class sizes of like 40 plus of people that speak 20 plus different languages. How do you go about doing that?
So I don't have 40 plus in a class. That would be
Rough.
yeah, that might be darn near insurmountable. Yeah, so language acquisition is and teaching language to speakers of other languages is just tricky. There's all sorts of strategies and tricks and tips, right, that I learned in my university experience. But I think some qualities that I have that make me successful as a language teacher are patience and flexibility. I can just like sit with someone and we can try to figure it out. We can be flexible. And so I think those are two just like personality traits that are important for language acquisition, but in terms of learning the skills, learning language themselves. Visual aids are imperative, right? We use photos and videos and models, and I bring all kinds of junk from my house to use as examples. I take pictures of my house, take pictures of my stuff and my yard and the town, and we go through the pictures. So an important thing to remember is that the people who are taking my classes are already fluent in a language, right? They already have language skills. It's just like accessing those and interplaying English inside of the skills that they already have. So I would say that visual aids, teaching in context, the great thing about teaching adults is I can teach them what they are really wanting to know, right? So teaching things in context. So some of our instructors meet with our students at the grocery store, and some of them meet with students at the library, right? And actually talking through the places and the spaces where students spend their time and giving them the vocabulary that they need for that, right? It's so liberating to teach adults in a large way because they know what they need to know, right? And they can advocate for themselves. So teaching in context is also a big part of it. And I think the last part, and again, I'm not going to go into like all the theories, but another important part that I make sure my students know is that failing forward is really the best way to learn, right? By producing a lot of language and encouraging students to use and produce language, even when it's wrong, like wildly wrong, and we're all thinking like, what is he trying to say? And we're all, everyone in class is working together to make sure this one student is understood and their question can get answered. It's just is honestly a lot of fun. It's like a big puzzle to figure out what people are trying to say, what they're trying to communicate, and then actually giving them the words that they need to do that.
Absolutely. No, that's amazing, honestly. Like coming from someone that has had to learn a second language and messing up so many times, I feel like there's a weird camaraderie that comes about failing.
Totally. Yeah.
I once told someone that Jesus died for my fish in Spanish because I don't know what I was saying. But do you have any like really cool, like just success stories about someone coming in from dang near knowing no language to just succeeding and doing things far greater than we could have ever comprehended?
Oh, sure. It happens all the time, right? So many times. So our program serves like newly arrived all the way through like preparing for your GED. So we have had just a ton of students work their way through that pathway into getting their GED and then enrolling into CWI credits. So we have someone right now studying to be a police officer. We have tons of people in a CNA program. We have people working environmental services. We take or we embed ourselves sometimes into different workplaces around the community in order to teach them English so they're able to promote to the next level within their community. We have students taking programming classes that have only been in the United States for a year and a half and have little to no English prior. It's hard to not find a success story, honestly. Right, that everyone's doing some amount of growth. Just all our students have different end goals. So some are trying to get a degree, some are trying to be promoted at work, some students are stay-at-home moms and want to help their kids with their homework. So yeah, every student is a success story. It just kind of depends on their goals.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like you are absolutely enamored with your job and what you're able to do.
It's the best job. It is the best job I have ever had, and I have had a lot of jobs. I would, yeah, it just is simply the best. It is. Sorry, Dan, mine's better than yours.
I won't tell him you said that. No, but so to kind of end this out, because our goal is really how can we just welcome refugees and make them more comfortable? Do you have any big pieces of advice that you would love to give that maybe one person watching will listen to this and be able to change and be able to be a more accepting person?
Mm-hmm. I think you just have to engage, right? You just have to engage with the refugee population to see the value that they bring to our community. I think that it's so key to not be afraid to not understand someone. Right? There's so much technology out there to allow us to bridge those language divides. I think sometimes people are afraid, right, to reach out to someone that's so different and might be hard to understand. But I think if you can get over that fear, engage with the people in our community, you'll really see how much value that they bring, not only culturally, but also economically and politically into our community. But I think that first step is just engaging. And one way you can do that is go to the farmers market, right? There's so many. Global Gardens is an amazing organization that supports refugees, refugee farmers. And there are many stalls at the farmers markets that are run by refugees. And that might just be a really easy first step, is go buy your veggies from them.
No, and you're 100% right. I think engaging and just really getting to know their story. And that's why I love your storytelling process. I know we talked about it yesterday, and you don't like it when people give you like the compliments, like, oh, you're doing God's work or stuff like that. But you truly are doing something special. You really, really are. And I know it's a job, but you are doing incredible work, and we really appreciate you. And I genuinely think that whether it's one person watching, hundreds, thousands, I do believe that people are going to listen to you and be able to learn so much more about the refugee community and how to engage better. So Sarah, thank you so much for just spending the time to talk to us today, and everything that you have done. But unfortunately, I wish we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but we are a bit out of time. My name is Rhys Stuart, and this is Boise State in our community. Sarah, thank you again so much.
Thanks, Rhys. I appreciate it.